Good morning or afternoon or evening. I don't know when you're watching this. Time's weird. Uh, time is linear and always works the same. Anyway, let's talk about FDR and the New Deal, about 1933 to about 1945. Now, some of you history buffs might realize, oh, that's when World War II happened. We're talking about World War II. Not yet. We'll come back to World War II. Don't worry. We're talking about FDR's presidency and the New Deal. And I know that 1933 to 1945 is a lot longer than 8 years. That's because his presidency lasted a lot longer than 8 years. So one of the big kind of like milestones in American politics is the first 100 days of a new presidency. And that goes back to FDR when, he gets elected in the middle of the Great Depression. He basically, tells people, judge me by what happens in my first 100 days in office. Give me a few months and I will get things going again. Doesn't promise to fix the entire Depression, but, he's going to really, start the wheels moving on it. And ever since then, basically every time we get a new president, the press starts going, oh, what are they going to do in their first 100 days? What's going to happen in their first 100 days? What are going to be their legislative achievements and priorities in their first 100 days? Who are they going to appoint in their first 100 days? What accomplishments are they going to have in their first 100 days? And this all started with FDR. Comes to mind, if you're watching this around when I'm recording it in 2020, we just had our election. All signs point to Joe Biden is going to be the one to win that election. You can feel that whatever way you'd like about that. But as far as math goes and the numbers go and the vote counts go and everything else, looks like Joe Biden's going to win it. So in January 20th, 1201, we'll have a new president. And I imagine if you turn on the TV anytime between now and then or around that time, all you're going to hear are news reporters and anchors and people going, well, what's Biden going to do with his first 100 days? This is when that started. FDR wanted us to look at his first 100 days. So here we have the election of 1932. I got this off of 270 to Win. A pretty fun website. You can go around and kind of play around with the elections and the numbers and see what would have happened if things had been a little bit different. But the actual results of the 1932 election is that President Herbert Hoover got beat really, really, really badly. He got 59 electoral votes, which is actually less than Alfred Smith, the Catholic, got running against Herbert Hoover in 1928. Roosevelt wins with 472 electoral votes, and he only loses those red states up in the Northeast. Herbert Hoover's only real power base are still in those big cities in New England. And even then, he doesn't win all of them, like New York. So Roosevelt comes in with an incredible mandate, and he promises a new deal for the American people. And I was trying to find the exact quote, and I couldn't find the exact quote, but basically, he's asked on the campaign trail by this one reporter, so what are the details of this new deal? And Roosevelt goes, does it matter? Like, I'm going to try and fix things. Hoover was ignoring things, which is mostly true. But Hoover did try to fix a couple things at the end. His plans just didn't really work. So, and Roosevelt is a distant cousin of Theodore Roosevelt. They weren't like father and son or like siblings or first cousins, but it's just a distant branch of the family. And actually, gosh, I meant to look this up. One of the branches of that family pronounces it Roosevelt, and one of the branches of the family pronounces it Roosevelt. I think Teddy was Roosevelt. I think FDR is Roosevelt. It's not a big deal, but a little historical bit of trivia there. Double check on that before you... I know that's true, I just forget which is which. So double check on that before you start passing around that new bit of knowledge. So we have... And there's a new deal that he promises, by the way. There's more than one of them. There's sort of legislative chunks as we go. The good news is there's not going to be a whole lot of questions on what happened in the first New Deal versus the second New Deal. Generally speaking, you're just going to want to kind of understand what's happening during the New Deal. But this first New Deal is that first 100 days, right? This is what he's going to do as soon as he can when he gets into office in early 1933. So this all happens pretty quickly. We have a bank holiday where FDR basically closes the banks so people can't do bank runs anymore. Like, your money is still in the bank, it's still safe, you just can't go get it right now. And that lasted for a little bit, and that was kind of to like get people to stop panicking. And once people stopped kind of like panic, I mean, people were still worried, there were still problems, not everything was fixed, but when people stopped panicking, they started reopening the banks, and then there were fewer bank failures sort of after that, which is something that, if you'll recall from the last notes, Governor Huey Long had basically done that in Louisiana, just not legally, just through threats. And in Louisiana, not a lot of banks closed. So, is what Huey Long did technically legal? Maybe not. But he did stop a lot of banks from getting closed in Louisiana, and when FDR did a similar thing, but this time, through a legal process instead of threats, it helped, at least a little bit. You have the Federal Emergency Relief Administration. You have groups like the Civilian Conservation Corps, the Agricultural Adjustment Act, National Industry Recovery Act, and the Tennessee Valley Authority. We're going to talk about most of those. One or two of those we might not get to specifically, but a lot of those we're going to talk about pretty specifically as we go through. In fact, there's going to be sort of an assignment one day that's just, here's this thing that was started in the New Deal, and here's what it looks like now, because some of these groups are even still around today. The Tennessee Valley Authority is still around today. But as you can see from these names, the Federal Emergency Relief Administration, well, the federal government is now going to try and help some people out. The Civilian Conservation Corps, that's a thing to just give people jobs doing stuff just because we needed to solve unemployment. There were actual things they were doing, but we'll get to it. The Agricultural Adjustment Act is out there to help farmers, farmers, right? The National Industry Recovery Act, trying to help industry get back on its feet, like factories. And the Tennessee Valley Authority, we'll talk about in a bit more detail as we get to it. So this is a quote that I think sums up FDR's ideas and plans for the New Deal. I don't think he succeeded at all of this, and he definitely compromised on a lot of this, especially when it came to black workers and other minority workers. He couldn't get the votes he needed in his own Democratic Party for a lot of these programs we're going to talk about if it was going to benefit minorities. And some of them didn't want it to benefit minorities more than white people, and some of them just didn't want it to benefit minorities at all. So when we look at stuff that passes during this time period, like the minimum wage, if you're somebody who's worked in the restaurant industry before, or a few other tip-based industries, and you're like, well, isn't the minimum wage $7, $8 or something right now? And how am I getting paid $2.13 an hour to work at this restaurant? Because the restaurants and other things don't fall under the same minimum wage as other jobs, because they're a tip-based income. And this started during the New Deal when the minimum wage started to go, and they couldn't, because of the 15th Amendment, equal rights. Is that the voting one? 14th Amendment. Yeah, 14th Amendment, equal rights under the law. They couldn't say, well, black people don't get a minimum wage, because that would be unconstitutional. So they just kind of looked at what industries black people, Hispanic people, other minorities, Asian people, other minorities in America, what kind of jobs did they mostly have? Okay, we'll make those based on tips, and then there's no minimum wage. So, was that FDR's idea? Probably not, but that's the compromise he went for to get the things he thought he needed. Anyway, this quote I like a lot. You got to show all sides of the people. You got to understand these are human beings. These aren't good guys. These aren't bad. I mean, some of them are bad guys. Hitler, bad guy. But a lot of these people we have in history, they're not good or evil. They're people, and they try their best, and they do what they try, what they want to do. And sometimes it works out, and sometimes it hurts other people, and sometimes it helps other people, and sometimes it's a bit of both. So this quote, I think, is a very good sort of like main idea, sort of the thesis statement of FDR's New Deal. And he made this statement when he signed the National Industrial Recovery Act early in 1933. In my inaugural, I laid down the simple proposition that nobody is going to starve in this country. It seems to me to be equally plain that no business which depends for existence on paying less than living wages to its workers has any right to continue in this country. By business, I mean the whole of commerce as well as the whole of industry. By workers, I mean all workers, the white-collar class as well as the men in overalls. And by living wages, I mean more than a bare subsistence level. I mean the wages of decent living. That wasn't a very good Roosevelt. That was almost a Kennedy for part of that. I don't know what that was. Sorry. I can do Roosevelt pretty good on the whole December the 7th, 1941. Anyway. On that one, I can kind of do a good Roosevelt. On this, I haven't really practiced as much. Not that I need to. I'm a teacher, not an impressionist, clearly. So, like I mentioned at the beginning of this, the first 100 days becomes sort of a thing, how you judge a president, how effective the president's going to be the rest of their 4 years in office based on that first 100 days. And FDR told us to judge him by his first 100 days, and now we've been doing it to all of the presidents since then. Oh, look, another picture of FDR sitting down. Weird. Anyway, let's talk about the successes of the New Deal, because a lot of the New Deal basically did what it was trying to do. It was able to help people during the Depression. It was able to help get unemployment under control, which was the big thing, right? If we can fix unemployment, we can fix the Great Depression. We can get out of it. So here you have people like trusting in banking again. So you have the bank holidays to try and like stop the panics, stop the bank runs. And then one of the agencies we're going to talk about in a lot more detail, because it's super important to the recovery from the Great Depression, is the FDIC, the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation. And here's a political cartoon. Obviously, we've talked before about political cartoons and how you can tell what the artist feels about the person they're looking at. How do you think this artist felt about FDR? I mean, look at that. He's taller than the other guy. Tall people tend to win elections. It's a weird thing in America. Not just America, but in America, it's like you go back through presidential elections, governor's elections, Senate elections, and a lot of time it's just the taller person that gets it. I mean, there's other reasons for it too, but it's just an interesting statistic that goes through American electoral statistics. But I mean, look at him. Like, he's tall, he's standing straight, his shoulders are nice and broad, shaking the hand, meeting the guy's eye, looking him in the eye. The chin is kind of strong, but not too strong. We'll see some political cartoons in this unit where people weren't a big fan of FDR, and that chin becomes comical. So this dude definitely likes FDR. He presents him as a tall, straight-backed dude, standing tall, shaking a man's hand, looking him in the eye. Nice, certainly a handsome face. Not like ooh, attractive, but like a handsome face, right? So with the FDIC, and of course the labels on these, FDR, and then the forgotten man. Yes, you remembered me. The worker, right? He's got like a pickaxe, like a coal miner. I'm pretty sure that's a pickaxe and not a crossbow. Why would it be a crossbow? So yeah, I mean, this is how FDR wanted to be seen. This is how he campaigned. This is how he gave his speeches, and this is how he wanted to be seen. And so the FDIC, Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation, is what every bank in America is a member of today. And what it basically does is, if you have an account with a bank, a checking account or a savings account, and that bank fails, that bank goes out of business. One of the things that bank has to do is give all their records to the FDIC, the federal government. And the federal government basically calls up everybody that had an account at that bank and goes, here's your money. So if you've got like 10 grand at a bank and the bank like goes under and falls apart and is not a bank anymore, then you'll get your $10,000. So why wouldn't you trust a bank? Even if the bank fails, even if the bank goes out of business, you get your money. So people start putting their money back in the bank, and that way banks are able to start lending out money again for cars and houses and small business loans, which starts that economy cranking again. And we're not fixed yet. We're not there yet, but it's a start. The unemployment rate, this is the biggest problem. Remember, if we can get the unemployment rate back down, people will be making money again. People will be spending money again. You know, the economy will really start going. And because what Herbert Hoover tried, giving money to businesses and banks to try and get unemployment down, didn't seem to work. The Reconstruction Finance Corporation, remember? It was kind of too little too late. We have a bunch of these, and we'll talk about these as we go, but the CCC, Civilian Conservation Corps, the WPA, Works Progress Administration, and the CWA is the Civilian Workforce Administration. Oh, we'll get to it. Sorry. The federal government just straight up hires people, which gave them money to spend, which let other businesses reopen and hire people and pay people, and then those people were spending money, which allowed more businesses to reopen and hire people, which started the economy going again. Again, we're not out of the Great Depression yet, but people are banking again, slowly. People are getting jobs again, slowly. And all these different agencies, like, you can tell these dudes are just like digging and like making a park better. I think these are part of the Civilian Conservation Corps. A lot of like the national parks we have today, obviously they were just like wild lands, but like the places that have nice, you know, buildings to go visit and nice paths to go walk on, and, you know, the infrastructure of like Yellowstone National Park, that was built out by the Civilian Conservation Corps. The federal government was like, we need people to have jobs, so we will pay you to go do this stuff. The Work Progress Administration, they would pay artists to paint murals in cities. They would, and we'll talk about all that. But basically, if you didn't have a job, you could go get a job with the federal government. It might be hard work out in the sun like these gentlemen, but like, that's part of it. I'm trying to think. I think my great aunt, no, she didn't do photography work for one of these. She did photography work, I think, in World War II. But yeah, if you go back in your family tree, and if your family's been in the U.S. since the 1940s, it's a pretty good chance some of your great grandparents, great uncles, you know, whatever branches of the family tree, chances are good some of them had jobs in these government agencies. And these weren't like government bureaucrats walking around an office building, you know, doing stuff. These people were like building roads. These people were building things and making things that the federal government was just paying them to do, which helped the unemployment rate because now they had jobs. One big example of this is the Hoover Dam. This is when the Hoover Dam gets built, 1931 to 1936. It's a 5-year thing. Yes, they built all of that. And if you've ever been, you know that, and this might look kind of small because it's like way up in the air, but if you've ever been, you know just how big this is. And it only took 5 years to build out. Now, the two things it did in order of importance is it provided hydroelectric power to most of the Southwest at the time. These days, it doesn't, you know, it still generates all that power, but we have higher power needs, and there's other power plants, and there's a lot more people that have moved out to those areas. But it still powers Las Vegas pretty much by itself, and other parts of Nevada, you know, California, Arizona, New Mexico. You know, there's a lot of electricity that is provided by the clean hydroelectric power of the Hoover Dam. We're not burning stuff. We're not using nuclear power there. We're not putting pollution into the air. Its water is falling, using gravity, to bring water down over these engines to pump the engines and get the electricity going. So this provides hydroelectric power to a huge chunk of the country at the time. And another nice thing, kind of the number 2 reason, but another nice thing, is we end up with a lot better drinking and farming water for this area. So you can actually have farms in Nevada, which it's a big giant desert. Not a whole lot of farms in big giant deserts. But with the Hoover Dam, you can make some of that work. So helped some of the water needs at the time, provided a huge amount of hydroelectric power at the time, and I guess kind of the number 3 thing is it provided a lot of jobs, a lot of construction jobs, a lot of engineering jobs, a lot of administrative jobs. Like once the thing opened, all the maintenance crews, all the people running it, all the engineers running it. That's a lot of people working. That's a chunk out of unemployment. But not everyone was a fan of FDR and his New Deal, and there's even historians and economists today that would argue that the New Deal is not what ended the Great Depression, that what FDR was doing was just kind of wasting a lot of money, and it just kind of so happens that other things were happening that kind of helped pull us out of the Great Depression, and it wasn't really FDR and the New Deal. So if that's true in 2020, that we look back on this from decades and we can really see the causes and the effects and we can measure how these things did and we can look at the numbers, and there's still disagreement on how much the New Deal really helped get us out of the Great Depression, at the time there were people really not a fan of what FDR was doing. And we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about that next time. And we're going to start with Huey Long, the most likely man in America to have been assassinated by a time traveler trying to stop a dystopian future America. So we'll see you then. Get some sleep. Take care of yourself. It's a pretty rough time out there right now. So take care. Have a wonderful day. Be excellent to each other.